All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's Alex Powell here for another episode of the Real Estate Leadership and Legacy podcast. And today I have a very special guest from Royal Legal Solutions, Scott Smith. Scott, how are you, man?
Doing good, Alex. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, my pleasure, my pleasure. Uh, we got wind of you a little while back, and after kind of reading your bio, I thought that this would be such an appropriate podcast to have on our channel, and I really admire and love what you're doing. So I'm gonna kind of explain a little bit about what you do, and then I'd love to hear a little bit about your background. But for the viewers out there, so Scott Royal Smith isn't just another entrepreneur; he's a new breed of wealth and lifestyle strategist. As the founder of both Royal Life and Royal Legal Solutions, he's helped thousands of high-income investors protect their assets, build wealth, and unlock their highest potential for living the best life. His not-for-profit, Royal Life, teaches peak performance through spiritual discipline, offering a blueprint for integrating mindset, emotional mastery, and business excellence. He is a multi-million dollar attorney, real estate investor, explorer, and a devoted spiritual practitioner with over 15 years of experience and more than a decade as a sought-after podcast guest. So Scott offers something rare, the tools to master both money and consciousness. And so when we consider this podcast, which is the Real Estate Leadership and Legacy podcast, I thought this is just perfect because the way I love to think about real estate is that, this is a vehicle that we're going to be utilizing to grow and build these legacies for our families to leave an impact. So if you don't mind, Scott, jumping right into it, can you tell me a little bit about what got you into this? Like, give me some of your backstory, please.
Yeah, so I actually started investing inside of real estate while I was in law school. I bought a transmission and auto repair shop and then rehabbed the business and the building and flipped it to graduate from law school without debt. And as I was working as an attorney coming out of school, I just continued to invest in real estate, just like, Robert Kiyosaki always said we should do, right? I hit my financial freedom numbers relatively quickly. And I started to travel around the world. What I found out is that actually the truth is that actually acquiring the assets is actually just the very first step of a much longer wealth journey. Because a friend of mine actually ended up getting sued while I was traveling, and he lost over $3 million from a single lawsuit. And he was very well insured, which shocked me because everybody had told me to that point said, hey, all you need is a really great umbrella policy and you're going to be fine. Turns out not to be the case, right? That insurance policies only are partial coverage. They're really good at getting rid of low dollar claims or easy things, but a lot of things that they don't cover. Just like every time a hurricane hits, the first thing insurance companies do is deny coverage. The same thing happens to you when you have high dollar claims and policies. They find a way to be able to avoid those claims when they get really expensive because that's their business model, collect premiums, deny coverage. And so I learned about asset protection. And then by joining high net worth men's groups of entrepreneurs at real estate investors like Tiger 21 and GoBundance, I started to learn more about how to combine not just the protection structures with the real estate, but how to optimize to pay 0 to 10% per year in taxes. By leveraging the tax performance of your investments alongside the financial performance. And then, of course, later on, I ran into the problem of saying, shoot, I ran out of depreciation in my real estate. Now I got to churn more assets. The whole time, I just wanted to go live life, go explore, go have fun, doing the things that I wanted to do, spend time with my family, take care of my girlfriend, work in the garden, do canyoneering, go climb Mount Kilimanjaro, go travel through Europe. But I kept getting sucked back in to having to do work. And that's what Royal Legal Solutions, my company, really became, is the way I became completely free. And that's what we help our clients do. And that's what I think is the most fun game there is around.
I love it. I love it. So when it comes to Royal Legal Solutions, I want to talk there because, of course, you have these two elements that are so beautifully intertwined. Tell me a little bit about what kind of features and benefits you offer clients, because of course you guys obviously have a legal side of things, being an attorney and everything, but let's asset protection, tax strategies, estate planning, you kind of run the full gambit. So for let's say an average real estate agent who's looking to grow their portfolio, what are some of the key things they should be looking out for, and how are you able to help?
So there's two sides of this. One side of the game is looking at what do really high net worth individuals do that are the 50 million plus individuals that have full blown family offices. And that's their team of asset protection attorneys, estate planning attorneys, there's CPAs on the tax strategy side, the CFOs for the financial side, and the investment advisory and investment deal flow. And that's how people that are really wealthy have figured out how to become totally free. What I did is I just studied that model and then fractionalized it. That way it's available now at an appropriate level of where everybody's at in that wealth journey. Typically, it's people that are making over $300,000 a year are the people we say, hey, that's where we can start, because that's where you're making enough money where we can show you how to use more advanced tax strategies and tax shelters that otherwise would only be previously reserved for the uber wealthy, and then take that and then push that back into investments to give you a higher return on your portfolio and give you some additional tax savings and churn that money in a tax advantage way to be able to accelerate your path to financial freedom.
It's amazing. And so a lot of the stuff you're talking about almost, would qualify as like smart accounting as well. And so do you guys have kind of an in-house accounting side of this business to kind of,
Absolutely. It actually takes all of the pieces. So what you can
I
imagine,
love
what
it.
I've done is I've built all of the team members and figured out how all of the team members have to work exactly well for somebody that had that 50 million net worth. Right. But
Mhm.
let's say you're that average person that comes in that's making that 300 plus $1,000 a year. Well, you actually don't need full-time people. You actually only need a few hours every quarter, but you need it to be the very right, precisely right advice for the time. And it needs to be all of integrated systems and processes across the team.
Mhm.
Otherwise, what happens is you either end up losing money or losing tax savings because you have the wrong information, i.e., you don't have the right brains looking at your stuff. Um, that they, or you end up spending a ton of time having to do management, meaning that the team, the system, and the process should actually replace your brain from having to be the central point. Not everybody figures this out. Like I've had, people that I know that are billionaires that'll spend 20 hours a week managing their money. Well, and what they've lost sight of is, okay, they don't have the right systems, processes, and teams. They just have a bunch of money, and that they're
Mhm.
afraid of the money going away, right? So not
Yeah.
everybody gets this ever. Sometimes.
This is it's honestly like hitting a nerve in my brain right now. Like, we have a pretty large real estate portfolio that we own and asset manage, and in that, I don't know how many. We're probably 40 plus bank accounts. In that, we have, I don't know, 12 plus corporations, and there's like a parent company and all this and you can't help but realize that there is this natural kind of trickle of money that just ends up being kind of lost in all this. It's not only productivity time for when you're trying to understand and make sure everything's in order, but you can't help but feel that there's this considerable lack of efficiency that comes with all this. Like, if I'm going to be buying X property, where do I put that property and how do I go about structuring it properly so that I'm, you know, putting it in the most tax advantaged place possible?
Yeah.
How do I sure that, that waste is captured and not, constantly leaving. Like, even if you think about it, like if you have a $5 a month or something bank fee, across 40 bank account, it's like these little things that do add up when we're focused on big picture, right?
Yeah, and you definitely want to, watch the details, right? Details are important. Like, and the advantage is that we have over any individual, right? Is that we get to solely focus on this problem, whereas for everybody else, it's only like a part of their overall life, right?
Hmm.
So we worked with, hundreds and actually thousands of clients like over the years to be able to strategically like solve this. And the results, as you mentioned, right, about like saying, well, it's important not just what investments you're going to make, but how do you make that investment? Is it your personal name? Is it in a private foundation, which is an absolute killer tax shelter that we can talk more about if you want to? And the results of that are actually not small, right? So we're looking a lot of times for our clients as being able to save them enough money and position enough money. Even like, let's say the difference of somebody who says, $100,000 that they would be able to set aside each year to be able to invest. Well, if you make that through like a tax shelter, then you actually end up with $100,000 to invest that you didn't have to pay money on that tax on that money that you earned from your W
Hmm.
2 or from your 1099 or your business, right? If you had to pay tax on it, you only have $70,000 to invest. If you're having to pay tax on all of the gains that you make throughout the 15-year timeline of your investment, you end up losing approximately 20 to 35% of your gains, depending upon how your gains are made, whether they're short-term or long-term capital gains, or it's taxed at ordinary income,
Hmm.
versus inside of a tax shelter where you essentially only have to pay 5 to 6% a year. So there's another tax advantage of how the money churns. So if we
Hmm.
look at it over a 15-year period, the projections that we have when we model this out for people is to say, listen, that the differences aren't small. That in a 15-year period, you're looking at a difference either having a net worth of 4 million or 9.5 million, and it actually has nothing to do with the investments you're making. It has to all do with the appropriate placement of the investment with the right tax strategy.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So for a newcomer that's just starting their journey, let's say that there's someone who qualifies, is in that $300,000 range, and is now looking to start making some investments. And I do want to preface one thing for our audience, because of course we're here in Canada. Now we do invest in the US, but you're in Texas, correct?
Yeah, I work in the United States, but we also help Canadian investors invest inside of the United States when they want to.
I love it, and that's what's key here, because I know a lot of the people we talk to, of course, as part of a diversification play in within the real estate realm itself is investing in the U.S. Different market, different spheres. If you were coming across someone who was just kind of starting, like, how would you break down a structure without giving too many of your secrets away?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different pieces, right, that all apply to everybody, everybody everywhere, right? So the first thing you have to do is protect your money from like lawsuits that can spring up because you're in a business, right? Even if you're a passive investor, there's ways in which that typically like lawsuits can still come back to bite you, and even if it's a small chance, right, that it's such an affordable place to be able to make sure you can just take risks off the table. That's when life becomes better,
Uh,
and that's what asset protection is about. It's like the company structures that allow you to avoid the lawsuits. You integrate that in with your estate planning structures to make sure that wealth is passed on to your heirs. Then you want to look at like what are the tax advantage structures that I can use, like different types of corporate structuring, nonprofit structuring, foundation structuring. It's going to be different depending upon which country you live in, right? But
mhm,
those general types of ideas still run the same. And then you'll look at asset classes to say what's my return, my cash flow or net worth return off of a certain type of investment, and then does that type of investment actually give me other tax advantages to it that are on top of the money that I get, i.e. the government's going to pay me to be able to make that investment. That's the
mhm.
general highest level thinking on that. But I don't know if you had anything you want to clarify on that.
Yeah, if I can jump in with a quick question. So even coming right back to the beginning, where we're discussing more asset protection. And you mentioned, most insurance companies, I get it. We're dealing with an insurance claim on a building that we bought. There was an insurance issue that happened prior to us purchasing it, and trying to get anything out of the insurance company is like pulling teeth. So I can totally appreciate they're not incentivized to hurry or pay up in any way, shape, or form. But when you're discussing, legal issues, or, a friend of yours being sued, what do you find is the more common ones that people often just don't even consider, and they're just a really easy fix that if they would have thought about it and put some sort of protection in place? Do you find it's like errors in omission, or do you find it's like these slips, trips,
Uh,
and falls like that? What do you think?
yeah, my hot take on that is actually it's the wrong type of thinking, right? And
Okay.
that, what you're elucidating there is actually common thinking, but it's I don't think it's the highest form of strategy. I think the
Okay.
highest form of strategy is actually to ignore the source of the claim for the most part. Because the reality of the situation is the lawsuit happens because somebody got hurt and they want to hold somebody else accountable. And a lawyer will find a reason that somebody else could reasonably be, quote unquote,
Yes.
reasonably be liable for that, and the
Hmm.
hopes of flexing enough leverage to get a settlement. That's
Hmm.
the way the system is actually designed. So the source of the claim actually doesn't matter nearly as much as you might think, right? So of course have good contracts in place, right? And of course have insurance policies in place. I recommend for everybody to have at least $1 million in an umbrella coverage, but just don't depend on them. We want to use insurance to be able to get rid of the easy claims quickly, but we use corporate structuring and isolating each one of your assets into its own trust or inside of its own corporate bucket. So that way, if there's ever a lawsuit against one asset, they can't come after any of the other assets. If somebody sues you, you don't actually own anything anymore. Just like rich people don't own things. If
Hmm.
corporations that own things that they get to go use. And this is a way that you become bulletproof to lawsuits. So don't worry about the claims nearly as much just follow best practices,
Yep.
that you can do there. But otherwise, it's the insurance policies and the corporate structuring to make sure that you're bulletproof from the lawsuits.
I love it. That's very good and sound advice, actually. I love that. Now, the other side of things that of course, in what you have to offer is the estate planning. And I know our tax structures are very different here in Canada versus the US, but there are some similarities. Like you guys have the 401k, we have the RSP. You guys have we have a tax-free savings account. I'm sure you guys have something similar in that regard as well. What are your take on trusts and setting up trusts? For example, like my wife and I, we have 4 kids, and we don't have any. We don't have a trust set up in any way, shape, or form, but we do have a parent company that owns all of our other companies, and those companies then own assets. And any of our larger assets are, of course, sheltered in their own holding companies as well, just to keep them completely separate. But for the average person starting out and then building, where would you suggest that they start?
Yeah. So what you want to do if you're just starting out is have at least 2 companies. One is an asset holding company that owns everything and doesn't do anything. That's how you make it protect it. Once it starts, if it does something, now it can be exposed to liability and somebody can sue it for the assets. Then you
Hmm.
need a separate company, which is called your operating company, that does everything, but it doesn't own anything. And so that way, because that's the one we want everybody to sue. And then you personally shouldn't own anything anymore outside of maybe a little money that you have in your personal bank account. Everything that's any substantial amount of wealth should all be owned by your holding company. Both of those companies are owned by your living trust, or your estate plan, right? So that's where your trust structure comes in. Because your trust structure is typically what's called a revocable trust, meaning you set up a trust, but you can revoke it at any time. There's no commitment to it. It only becomes rigid or irrevocable when you die. And then it has all of your assets are distributed in the way that your trust is set up, right? Now, that structure, I always recommend, is something we want to cover off on at least once a year. Because during the
Hmm.
year, you're going to be have bought stuff, sold stuff, transfer money into a new brokerage account, bought whatever, right? And the documentation needs to be accurate about what are the current list of all of the assets. Because think about it, when you kick it, how is anybody going to know where all the stuff is?
Yes.
Logins to the bank accounts, the account numbers, the amounts, where do we go for all of this, right? So you just update it once a year to be able to make sure, hey, I bought this asset in my personal name and I never transferred it into my holding company. And okay, great. And okay, let's note that on the living trust document on our schedule of assets there. So that way we can know, if something happened to me, they just go to that. That's where all the assets are. That's where the documents are. Now, if you're working with a company that's like mine or mine, you would do that in conjunction with a professional team, which would provide continuity to the family. So
Hmm.
that way, the family is inheriting a team that's already running a system and process, already familiar with how everything works, and needs to work there, and then gets the family up to speed with all of that support, right? And then that makes it really, really seamless. Otherwise, what can happen is you lose assets because nobody knows where they're at. They just get lost, right?
Yeah.
Or they get caught up inside of a court system, which can
Yep.
equally be bad, where you have creditors' claims and other things coming after it. And even if all of that runs seamlessly, you also then, if it runs through the courts, everything is part of the public record of who got how much money, which could potentially put a target on the back of the people that you were trying to help with by giving them the assets whenever you died.
Yeah, yeah. That's amazing. Well, in Ontario, I remember talking to my accountant about it, and he at the time suggested not to do a trust just yet because, of course, our kids are very young, and our trusts actually lapse after a few, I think it's like 20 some odd years. So there's almost like an expiry to when things reset at a certain time frame. So the strategy didn't seem like it was going to be all that useful at the time, but it's something that I've always wanted to explore. And I know, of course, in the US, it's much more common, but it's something that, of course, we have assets right now that are only going to appreciate over the next 20 years. And you want to protect those and you want to have a
What happens if it happens in the next 5 years? Do you have it detailed of documented of who's going to take care of the kids, that they have access to assets, how much of the assets can they access at any given time, so that way they don't just blow all of that money? What's going
Mhm,
to
mhm.
happen to the kids when they
So
turn
we have a general will, but you're right. From a lot of our business stuff, we don't have that set up. Now, our lawyer was talking, actually, it was funny, we were golfing yesterday with our lawyer, my corporate lawyer. So he was saying that, you can set up for each of the corporations a separate will. But then again, it's like you have all these corporations. It's better to kind of have some sort of umbrella that is just a trust that feeds into everything, and then that's directed. And it's an interesting way to think about like I been part of many different real estate investors networks, and one of the sessions I was at very much resonated, where the guy there was talking about creating your briefcase, and that at the end of the day, if something were to ever happen to you, you would tell people where that briefcase is, they'd open it up, and that's everything laid out beautiful for them. Because you hit the nail
That's
on the
right.
head. If right now something, now we like, of course we have stuff written down. It's not as organized obviously as I'd like it to be sometimes, but um it would be challenging for somebody to go through the labyrinth that is our assets, right? So
Well,
I can.
imagine it's whoever you have listed, and that's typically our spouse, right? As we like
Hmm.
trust our spouse to manage everything. But
Yep.
imagine if you don't have like a wealth strategist that's looking at the comprehensive view of like what needs to happen, like that, and that person, their role in your life is to create the system and processes of transition, right? And to ensure the organization of what happens, right? A lot of times we don't want to pay attorneys to do that because they're like, they're really expensive, right? And that's really
Hmm.
true because you're actually creating a new system and process from scratch with most attorneys. So that's why I think that's the gap that we fill, saying like, what's the cost effective solution by working at scale with similarly situated people to be able to have a system and process that everybody can plug into that's in between that 1 to 50 million mark before they can go to the full family office route. So it's like it's not cheap, but it's affordable, but it also like covers off on those critical gaps that are actually way too expensive to be able to pay somebody $400 an hour to create a custom plan for, right? Or a custom
Yeah, yeah,
system
yeah.
process for, right? So we might not be able to be like a perfect client for you or for like the maybe even everybody listening to this podcast. But my intention in being able to share everybody like that is that they'd be able to at least look at what we've created to say, oh, here's a company that's at least similar, right?
Hmm.
And to be able to have that level of insight.
Hmm. Do you find that like uh, can you speak to Canadians dealing with their own like portfolio
Yeah.
structuring here
What
locally
what
as
we'll
well?
do is when we help Canadian clients, we'll just partner with a Canadian attorney. So that way the Canadian
Hmm.
attorney is going to navigate the intricate details of what needs to happen, which is actually only about 5% of the problem.
Hmm.
95% of the problem is actually the systems and the processes that go into it
Yeah,
and the level of thinking that needs to happen. Getting the execution to happen right is actually cheap, right? I can hire really high, I won't get into the details of like why that's the case, but that's actually the truth of the problem, you know?
I love that. I love that. So definitely, definitely we'll want to explore this. And what would you say, like, is this like a reoccurring fee model where it's like, there's quarterly check-ins or something like that, or is this this is the charge out to help you structure what you've got going on, and then, every single other time that we check in, it's a yearly thing. There's maybe like a consultation type of fee. How does that work?
Yeah, the way that we've set it up and is that we'll do like a set up fee to do like the full build or review, right? And for most companies that are mine and like mine, that's somewhere between like 25 to 50K, depending upon scope, right?
Hmm.
But what we've set it up is to say, but with the run cost for it, to be able to have the attorney team, CPA team, CFO team meeting with you like once a quarter and giving you enough hours to work on most of your stuff is only going to cost you about like 3 to 5K a year. So there's high upfront cost, but there's low annuals, which makes it pretty
Hmm.
attractive for people because high annual fees usually eats into profits too much and makes it unattractive. And our big back end stuff that we do with that is actually working with companies that are like yours to help underwrite different investment opportunities from real estate, oil and gas, small business funds, et cetera, because that becomes the last piece of the puzzle. After you get free and you have a team and a system process that runs things, you actually need deal flow, but you need confidence in that deal flow. You need diversified deal flow as your like wealth grows over time.
Hmm.
And that's the difference in thinking between like people who are saying like, do we want to just solve a legal problem or are we actually trying to solve a whole lifestyle and wealth problem?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's what
yeah.
I think that's what you really want to find. You want to find somebody who's really trying to solve the lifestyle problem that integrates all of the money problems. Because most of the time, the biggest drags on us being able to enjoy the life we want is actually not initially it's not having enough money, and then it becomes worrying about being a proper steward of the money.
Hmm. Well,
And
that's
you got to
that's
get
a
free of both
very,
of them if
very
you're gonna be free. You got to be free of both of them if you're actually going to be free.
that's a very, very good line. I love that. I'm gonna I'm gonna note that one actually for the comment section. But I think this is actually a really good segue to get into the other aspect of your I guess structure, the royal life, right? So I was kind of going through that, and that you had this point of like from chaos to cash flow, and like the emotional reactivity that's killing performance. Can you give us a little bit of detail on what this is? This is a non-for-profit, right? And you're
Right.
teaching peak performance through spiritual discipline. So can you go into a little bit more detail on that side of things?
Yeah. So spiritual disciplines here doesn't mean dancing around naked around a campfire. What it actually is
Well, that
saying,
sucks. I'm just kidding.
well, we can, like,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
you can if you want
Yeah,
to. And
yeah,
actually, when you're free, like you actually can do anything you want.
yeah,
It, it
100%.
it's actually about the crux of the matter is that everything in your life revolves around what actions you can take. The lie you believe is that you're free to take any action that you want to. You're actually limited in the actions that you can take based upon what internal resistances you feel to it. Your fears, your anxieties, your worries, all the things that make you start planning and future projecting, and start to see that all of that's running inside of you, right? And
Yes,
a
yes,
lot of us
yes.
have been able to see that that's actually what's happening. So you can see that your actions are actually limited, which means you're actually not taking optimal actions. Your
Hmm.
actions are actually clouded and limited. Well, what are they limited by? Well, they're limited by whatever your thoughts are and your emotions are. Your thoughts and our emotions are the soup from which you can take actions.
Yes.
So don't worry about the actions, actually. Just worry about, can I control my thoughts and emotions? That's what true spirituality actually is. The practical
Hmm.
spirituality, the stuff that really matters, that comes in here into like the real world, is that. I can tell you it's also the end of spirituality, right? It's the integrated form and it's also the very end point. It'll take you to the highest levels, the deeper you understand of what that actually means to control your thoughts and emotions. But we don't have to go there. Let's just make a bunch more money and have a much better life here in the real world. And we'll worry about the ecstatic, amazing, all the other stuff. Like, let's worry about that later, right? And that's
Yeah.
what I'm really focused on is like, how does one do that? And what are the byproducts of that allow us to optimize every area of our life? We have the energy stored from the money. So we have tons of resources now. But now we got to be able to figure out to do those hard things about how do I actually optimize my life, my health, my family, my relationships, my fun and adventure, my charitable giving, all of those pieces that would say like, oh, that's how I'm going to define what my best life looks like, is how well all of those areas are working for me. And
Oh man,
all
I love it. I love it. I love this so much. I think it's one graph that I end up kind of reminding myself and even some of our staff too is the urgency versus important graph. I'm sure you've probably seen it too. Like
sure.
the quadrant of like,
Yeah.
if it's not
Highs and
urgent,
low
it's not.
points. Highs
Yeah,
and low
it's
points.
and the question always comes like the challenge, of course, if it's not urgent, not important, it's a fairly easy one. If it's very urgent, very important, easy one. The challenge comes between the other two when it's if something's very urgent but not important, or if something's very important but not urgent, which do you tackle first? And I
Yeah.
find personally, I get very much caught up in the urgency that's not important. And then you
Right.
realize that things get pushed, and then you're kind of caught chasing the wheel. And they call it the wheel of death. It's just like
Right.
you're just spiraling out of control, you know?
It's a beautiful insight, Alex, for like how that works that you come up with, and I think that's probably really common for people, right? Is that there's a perceived urgency that's not real, right,
Mm-hmm.
to it, and then it makes us get into like these frantic states of activity. And
Yes,
in your frantic states of activity, are you really being like that much more successful, or are you just doing a bunch of stuff,
that's the
right?
latter, always the
So
latter,
it's
for
always a
sure.
ladder, right? Okay, cool. So you actually are aware of this. This is amazing.
Yes.
Okay, great. I don't meet many people that are that aware of this. Say like, hey, I actually understand that I'm actually way
I'll
more
be, I'll
active
be
than what I'm
very
using.
honest with you. I'm very aware of it, and I
Yeah,
still fall into the trap constantly.
100%. So that's actually where spiritual discipline comes in. Like the
Yes.
the right kind of practical spiritual disciplines are how you get out of that loop. The
Hmm.
problem that has run in most all scenarios is that the people that understand spiritual disciplines don't also interact in the real world in a way that is saying, here, this I'm actually building stuff and I'm engaged in a hostile world of things pushing on me,
Hmm.
right? They've removed themselves from that, right? So they're not playing in the hardest levels. We're playing in the hardest levels, doing what we're doing, right? And so what we get to be able to have the opportunity to do when you play at the hardest levels is you get the most immediate feedback. So your life, your internal alignment of your life, the peace that you're looking for, the mental clarity that you're looking for, you're actually in the best possible position and the most fertile ground to make the fastest progress spiritually than anybody else because you're in the most hostile environment for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you had the right tools that were simple enough for you to be able to access inside of the moment, then you would be able to do it. And you would find yourself like growing tremendously fast. With inside of 6 weeks, I find with all of the students that I work with that they make so much progress in the first 6 weeks that they say, holy smokes, I actually need 6 months to just integrate this piece of it because things in my life are actually changing too fast in a positive direction. And I need to just hold on to this right here. So, okay, cool. Great, because we have all the time we want to, and things only need to change positively at the speed they need to change. Change itself is inherently uncomfortable for a lot of us, even if it's in the right direction. And say, okay, cool. So let's take that inside of its own pace.
Oh, I love it. I knew this conversation was going to be awesome. We're going to have to get deeper into this, but we are getting on our time. We're actually a little bit over, which is just fine. But listen, Scott, I'm so grateful for you sharing this insight, and this stuff just revs me up. I'm so excited about this, and we're going to have you back on the podcast if you don't mind at some point. But I'd love to go deeper into some of this stuff. In the meantime, though, if people like, of course, we're going to put some of your, how to find you and stuff like that. But what are some like last piece of advice maybe that you'd want to share, and what's your preferred method of someone reaching out to you if they have any sort of questions, or how can we help your business and your causes by helping send people your way?
Yeah, whether you're trying to upgrade and accelerate through your wealth journey, wherever you happen to be at. If it makes sense from that in that area for you, then it's royallegalsolutions.com. It's also the best way to interact with my team, even if it's on these like royal life kinds of concepts that we touched on, like here at the very end. What I would tell everybody is that if nothing changes, then nothing changes. Either you have to just get really good at accepting just that things are the way they are in your life, or you have to get good at saying like, I'm going to do something different today, even if it's really small, and figuring out what's the small thing I'm going to do. So either get good at one or the other.
I love it. I love it. What sound advice? And honestly, you definitely know your stuff. You're just even the way you talk about it. So, guys, if you guys have any sort of questions on strategy, estate planning, asset protection, guys, give Scott a call or reach out to his team through his website. There, once again, royallegalsolutions.com. My gratitude to you, Scott. Thank you so much for joining, and I wish you well.
Thanks, Alex.